What's up, everybody? Welcome to Screen Geeks. This is Dave.
This is Barry.
Yeah, we're nerdy. Yeah, we're such colossal nerds.
So white and nerdy.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that song was written about us. Absolutely. Yes, for certain, sir. That's why Weird Al has such an affinity, well, for our entire lives. Let's just face it. For this week, we decided we talked about Star Wars. Let's talk about the lesser spoken about franchise that happened. Yeah, Star Trek happened. And I know we were talking before we started recording this. I'm pretty sure we talked about when the reboot launched, but I think we ended up pod fading just as Into Darkness started when it was coming out, because I was working at Denver Comic Con when that happened. Then we're going to talk about Beyond, so the new trilogy, and then I know you haven't had a chance to watch Star Trek Discovery or Picard, so I'll touch base on those real quick. Very interesting entries as well, even though they aren't related to the reboot franchise. But why don't you kick us off talking about that reboot? We'll revisit it ever so quickly. We'll run trailers on all three of those movies. We won't do stuff for the TV show, though.
Okay, well, in 2009, we had our first new Star Trek film since Star Trek Nemesis, which is all the way back in 2002. That's a lot of no Star Trek movies. This is
you explained that by saying that Star Trek Nemesis came out.
Well, it's funny because this is something, and I know we talked about this on the old pod, same pod but older pod,
Volume 1.
There you go, volume. Yeah, perfect. This is something that Paramount Pictures had been threatening to do for decades. Star Trek V bombed, and they were going, okay, that's it. We're pulling the plug. The next thing we're going to do is Starfleet Academy. Star Trek VI was supposed to be Starfleet Academy. They were talking about either doing it as a series or what they really wanted was to do a new film with this young cast. And instead they made Star Trek VI, and I'm glad they did. I think it's one of the best Star Trek films. I love that film.
I think it's my favorite, really honestly. Yeah. Undiscovered Country is a phenomenal film.
I completely agree with you. It's fantastic. It's a rich, smart movie. Just gets better year after year after year.
Yes. So I just detouring really quick. Like, I've thought about this a lot. The one thing I liked about 5 was that interpersonal relationship between Bones, Spock, and Kirk. Yes. And it really it played with that and just put a good story around it for 6.
I agree. I completely agree. Yeah, there are, I wrote an article about it. If anybody wants to Google it, it's on the hit site, Hollywood in Toto. I wrote an article defending Star Trek V. I'm one of those weird people. I don't love Star Trek V, but I don't think it deserves its reputation as the worst thing ever. I don't think it's the worst Trek movie by far. I think that would be Star Trek 3 or Star Trek Nemesis or Star Trek Insurrection. I don't think 5 is that awful. I think there's a lot of good things about it. But in any case, not to completely devolve. But
Star Trek. Here's the thing: the old movies are going to come into play. You can't get around that.
Yeah, they're definitely going to play, especially when we talk about the new films, which feel kind of strangely familiar, like the old films. But this movie, I mean, it was basically like, okay, let's go back to the drawing board. Nemesis was an unfortunate film, and they went back to the Starfleet Academy premise. This movie seemed like it couldn't quite work. It had a lot going against it. No one really knew at that time if J.J. Abrams was really the right person for this. It was a really bright idea, but it wasn't like a slam dunk at all. The cast was mostly character actors. Chris Pine at this point was best known for a Lindsay Lohan film, which I won't be so cool to mention that film on this podcast.
No, which one is it? Was it I Know What Killed Me or something? Or
no, it was Just My Luck. I said it anyway. Sorry.
Okay, Chris Pine. Sorry. No, I was curious. I was like, if it was Mean Girls, okay, cool, but. Okay, no.
Chris Pine is going to find me and hurt me.
No, he's moved on to bigger and better things. It's okay.
Much better things. Yeah, he wound up being a great actor. But this, I mean, there was a lot riding on this movie to work, and I don't know that anybody thought this movie was going to be a slam dunk. And it was supposed to come out Christmas of 2008. It wound up coming out summer of 2009. I only know that because I'm wearing my shirts, and it's got the star date on the back.
I think mine's gone.
Oh, that's okay. You're never losing your Star Trek cred, Dave. I met you because of your Trekkiness. So really quickly,
but my wife's Trekkiness is even bigger than mine.
Absolutely. But I was introduced to you, as our longtime viewers know. Our wives thought we should meet because we're both big movie buffs, and for no other reason. So we meet at this restaurant. And it's going okay, but David and I are kind of shy. We had met each other. We're trying to find a layer of common interest, and it's going okay. So we have this lunch, and it's, we're kind of stopping and starting. Julia, my wife, and your wife Stephanie are really chatting it up. You and I are like being polite, but like whatever. Julia goes to the bathroom. Somebody mentions Star Trek, and your wife talks about how you have a picture of like you have multiple photographs of you, like, Star Trek themed pictures in your house. And I just found that fascinating. And I said, honestly, I'm not like the biggest Trekkie in the world. I'm a big fan of the movies more than the shows, but like, anyway, by the time Julia came back, we were like, it was on. It was great.
She was the fourth wheel. That's what turned into.
Jules was like, what did I miss? I'm like, hey, we're buds now. And then I think it was not too long after that, you called me out of the blue. Actually, you and I went to Starfest. I took you to the 2005 Starfest just to check it out. And I remember that year because that was the year War of the Worlds was the big movie. So there was all this War of the Worlds stuff. So you and I went and checked that out. And then a year later, this is for our ScreenGeeks fans, our lore, you called me out of the blue and said, hey, Superman Returns is premiering midnight at the Cinemark. Why don't we go and do some man on the street interviews with some of the people lining up for the theater? I'm like, that sounds like a fantastic idea. And thus ScreenGeeks was
and thus began the first showing experience.
That's right. Oh,
you can't have one without the other, sir. You can't.
This is true. Yeah, this is true. Yeah, you and I were working for a site called firstshowing.net, which still exists.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because we ended up getting to interview Zachary Quinto. I think I've got the video somewhere. I might have the video somewhere.
If you have the audio, that would be golden.
Oh, yeah, the audio is on the site, but I think, awesome. I want to say I ran into the video not too long ago. I might see if I can, now that I'm kind of learning some video stuff, that might be worth throwing up. Not throwing up, but
putting out there, yes.
It was very interesting because you talk about how much is riding on this movie, and it was very apparent that like Zachary Quinto was trying to be really cool and play it cool doing the interviews and stuff, but it was very clear he was. I'm not going to say like I don't want to say anything that would reflect him in a poor light. It was very clear he was in a situation he's not familiar with and wasn't sure how he'd be received.
Yes.
And all of us who talked to him thought he was fantastic. He was great to talk to.
Yes, you're absolutely right, Dave. I believe, if I remember correctly, I think his representative was always kind of like in the distance, watching very carefully. Because just to jump to it, and I appreciate you bringing up this anecdote. Zachary Quinto had just wrapped on Star Trek 2009. He just wrapped. Going to Starfest in Denver, Colorado, to do an interview with a bunch of nerds like us. This is like the first thing that he had done, finishing up like this big gigantic movie just a few days earlier. So he's sitting with us,
walking into the nerd gauntlet. I mean, he was able to walk around the convention and no one bothered him because no one had any idea who he was. This was before Heroes.
At this point, was this? It was before Heroes. Okay, yeah.
I want to say it was. Let me double check.
It might have been, but I mean, at this point, he was there because of this movie.
Actually, Heroes started in 2006, but it may not have just. Yeah, he was able. That's going to have a different kind of notoriety than if like a Denver Comic Con was around at that time. So like Starfest was at that point was very much Star Trek centric, and so no one knew who he was at that point.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So he was able to be kind of anonymous, but he was there to talk about the film. But it was also this interesting situation where he really wasn't able to talk about the thing. Like what I remember my conversation with him, and I love that you were there to share it with me. I remember we talked about what it was like putting the ears on, what it was like having Leonard Nimoy as a mentor on the set of that film. And that was it. He was very polite and really nice. And I asked him some questions about his theater background and his process as an actor. But he made it very clear, like, he couldn't say anything about this movie. It was shrouded in secrecy. It was supposed to be, like, this was in April of that year. It was supposed to be out that Christmas. It wound up not coming out until May of the following year.
Yeah. It was a very interesting time. I was gonna ask what the timing was of another guest, but we'll leave that for a time offline when we talk about that.
Okay.
But yeah, it was very interesting because he was like, no, I'm totally comfortable with it. And he kind of like unconsciously had more pillows around him and, just kind of like, because he was sitting on a couch. This was when we were in a closet pretty much doing the interviews. I was playing a sound engineer and then for everyone who did interviews. So I got to sit in on all of his interviews and he was fantastic through the whole thing.
Yes.
And then the movie came out and it was pretty darn good. Yeah, let's just jump into the trailer right now and then we'll talk about, do a quick recap of what we thought of it, especially revisiting it recently.
Okay.
Are you afraid or aren't you?
I will not allow you to lecture me.
Then why do you stop me? Prepare to fire all weapons. I like this ship. It's exciting. Space is disease and danger, wrapped in darkness and silence. Buckle up.
So yeah, this was an entirely new beast of Star Trek. Like, this is an uphill battle. Like, I mean, for the context, I mean, the idea of touching the sanctity of the original series in any way, shape, or form was going to be a tough sell no matter what. And I know that we have friends like Chris Page over at Orphaned Entertainment who are not a fan of this movie, and especially not the second one. I don't remember what he thought about Beyond, but just like, it wasn't going to work. It was Star Trek in name only to him. When I saw it, I almost turned around. I saw it opening night, and I almost turned around and bought tickets to see it a second time the same night. Because it was so new and interesting.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dave. I love this movie. I'm probably even more so than yourself. This was on my top 10 best of 2009 list. I love this film so much. For me, the experience I had with this movie was identical to what I had watching Iron Man the prior year. It's an emotionally rich film, and that's what really connected with me. This cast is fantastic. Chris Pine carries this movie. He is somehow doing William Shatner and also not doing William Shatner, if that's even possible, but he is.
It's a film that captures the spirit of the characters without doing mimicry.
Exactly.
And I remember I was critical initially because they cast John Cho, who's Korean, as Sulu. And it's like, guys, can you at least get the country right? But he's fantastic through the entire run of the films.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, everybody, all the Zoe Saldana, Anton Yelchin, all down the line. Carl Urban, who I've never been impressed with before. And I can't say I've ever liked him all that much since, really. I think he's so fantastic as Bones. I love his take on
He's
Bones.
the closest to inhabiting DeForest Kelley without doing just a straight up ripoff, because you really can't do that. But I have to stand up for Carl Urban. Hang on now. So he was fantastic in Doom. Dread. Sorry.
Okay.
Which there's not much to the character. I can roll with that. But did you see the show that he was on, Almost Human?
No.
It is a futuristic cop procedural. I hate cop procedurals, but he gets paired up with an android, and he has problems with having an android, and he is fantastic. He's just as good as he is in Star Trek, if not better. So it is.
And this is a recent show? Or?
Yeah, it's within the last 5 years or so. It didn't even quite go a full season. It kind of got the Fireflies treatment because it was on Fox.
Oh boy. Yeah,
but what's there, it is well worth seeking out. Like, I was legitimately upset when I got to last episode. I'm like, they ended the story so that you could, the story made sense when it ended. But I was like, I want more of this, because the interactions that he has with his co-star, who I'm brain farting on at the moment, but I'm just like, must defend Carl Urban. Yeah,
I appreciate that. Carl Urban needs his defenders. He does.
Well, and Chris Pine may have had the toughest road of all, because, I mean, Shatner's very easy to do a caricature of, and the only time that you have that, even a glimpse or a nod to that, is at the very end when he walks on the bridge and is like, Bones, like very Shatner delivery for that one word, but still feels very much like the same character. Beyond that, it's just like, how are you going to do this with the storyline? And they found a way to do it. Like, essentially, they said, your dad's Star Trek is still there. This is just something completely new.
Yeah, I love the whole thing of this movie. I mean, the one thing about this film, like, it doesn't, the chemistry with this cast is so good, it doesn't even need a villain. And that's the only thing about the movie. I mean, Eric Bana is villain. He's very good in the movie. I forget he's even in this film, honestly.
It is the weak point of the movie, for sure.
He is. And Bana is fine, and he's committed to the role. The character is kind of interesting, but really, it's about this cast. And I think that's even more interesting, how these characters are overcoming their insecurities. Spock is really insecure in this movie. He is not the cold, collected, Zen controlled individual that we know. I mean, he's very emotionally volatile, and so obviously is Kirk. It's really just about like their first adventure together. And I couldn't get enough of that. Like yourself, I saw this more than once when it was in theaters, and I adore this film. I really do. I can't think of anything about it I didn't like. The opening scene had me in tears the first time, and it had me in tears the last time I saw it. I mean,
absolutely, and it's pre-Thor Chris Hemsworth.
It is, and he's wonderful. That was the first thing I ever saw him in. Yeah, no, I think Abrams really did a really good thing here. I mean, he made it very obviously. It's very 2009. It feels, as many have noted, it has the pacing and the action oriented mindset of a Star Wars movie. But I'll just to jump to it without burying the lead. I like these three movies more than the recent Star Wars movies. I do.
I think that's
more
fair.
Than the three basic ones, the three canon films. I like it more than Force Awakens, Last Jedi, Rise of Skywalker. I do. I like the three.
I will agree with you for 2/3 of these movies. We'll just say that. I think I was shocked at just how astoundingly good the performances were. Like Zachary Quinto, again, Spock's not an easy thing to do. And I mean, you could say that Nimoy didn't leave a lot there for someone to really follow up with. But like just the subtle choices that were made, like when he tells the Vulcan Science Council live long and prosper, whilst the subtext being a giant middle finger, it's like that really takes talent to do. And then you've got Anton Yelchin doing Walter Koenig, but again making it his own and leaving nods to that character while still putting in a really solid performance. And Zoe Saldana, I mean, you see the glimpses of her becoming Gamora and just becoming this action star. I mean, it's from top to bottom. The performances are great on the ship. Eric Bana, not so much. I mean, you should. If there's a criticism, it's that you shouldn't need a 4-part comic book series to read to understand what the heck's going on with the Romulans. I mean, they explain it somewhat, but the comic explained it in way more detail that actually made sense and made me appreciate the movie more. But again, like the whole motivations of the villain were kind of not quite so much there.
I can't stand it when movies do that. It's maddening. It's one thing to watch the film and then, okay, I want to read the comic book later and see the expansion of the character. But when it's required, when you have homework to read the comic book before the movie, no. Yeah, absolutely not.
That happened with Brent Spiner. Like he came to Starfest the next year and he didn't want to talk Star Trek at all because Data is involved in this prequel comic book, but doesn't figure into the movie in any way, shape, or form. So it's just like, I got nothing to say, folks. I understand. I'm glad you think I do. I would love to be involved, but I'm not. Like, so yeah. So I think that's a good enough recap there. We can go ahead and jump into the turd in the punch bowl that is Star Trek Into Darkness. I'm sorry, wait.
I honestly, like, my order of preference, I mean, for me, it's the order of appearance. I loved the first one. I didn't mind the second one. I barely remember the third one.
Okay,
but
we will have a difference of opinion.
So let's jump into Darkness.
Let's go ahead and watch the trailer. That's
okay. Here we go.
By now, all of you have heard what happened in London. The man who did it is one of our top agents.
Your commanders have committed a crime I cannot forgive. None of you are safe.
Clear the road!
Have I got your attention now?
So yeah, that looks promising. And to go back to 2009, I walked out of that movie thinking, like, this is absolute, like, your daddy's Star Trek is still out there, but this is not it. Like, they blew up Vulcan. They set the entire universe in an entirely new direction. I literally said as I walked out of the theater, as long as they don't just rehash Wrath of Khan, I'm in.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, when they cast Benedict Cumberbatch, I don't know if I told you this or not, I had an entirely different theory about who he was going to be playing.
Who do you think he was going to play?
I thought he would be the most amazing, phenomenal, conniving version of Harry Mudd that we could ever have.
Ooh, yes.
Like, I bounced that off Steph, and I was like, she was like, oh, and then she was really mad that he wasn't playing Harry Mudd. So that was like kind of strike one. I was like, please don't do that. Please don't do that. And then the movie starts with a spaceship that's a submarine that So here's the thing about Star Trek. There's technobabble and gobbledygook. There absolutely is. However, there's some attempt to have an internal consistency and logic. Like this, like Star Trek is kind of the thing that's really made me have this philosophy in life when it comes to film. As long as the film sets up its own rules in its own universe and adheres to them and plays by those rules, I'll go along for the ride. It could be absolutely ludicrous and ridiculous. That's why I cut No Holds Barred last week as much slack as I did, because it's not a good movie, and the rules of the universe are idiotic, but it played by those rules.
Sure. And
it's just like, we have 40, 50, 60 years of Star Trek establishing how you do what they're going to do, and you did that? Call me Super Trek nerd. I understand that. That's absolutely, if you want to call me that's absolutely fair. But it's just like there has to be some kind of logical sense, and then it didn't get any better from there for me, honestly. So, what was your thought going into this movie?
I didn't want it, honestly. I'm one of those weird people that I know it doesn't make any monetary sense. It makes artistic sense, which no one cares about. I thought Star Trek 2009 was so good. I just said, don't do any sequels. I don't want a sequel to this. Don't. This is great. We got a glimpse of who they were before they became the legends that they are. That's it. I don't want any sequels. Don't make this cast. And I was the same way with you. I was like, don't repeat the prior plots of the prior movies. Definitely not in order. So I'm like, okay, is Chris Pine going to direct the fifth one? It's going to be about the search for God. Like, I mean, like, seriously, I'm thinking, like, because it really did seem like they were doing exactly that. And we'll get into Star Trek Beyond, which I feel like they're guilty of that too. So I did not walk in with any kind of optimism. And the other thing too, at this point in my life, I've since changed, but at this point in my life, I did not care about Benedict Cumberbatch at all.
Okay.
I discovered Sherlock late. It wasn't until all the way to The Imitation Game. Until that, I was never impressed with him. I remember when he played the dragon in the Hobbit movie. I'm like, great. I wasn't a fan. I was not on board. I definitely didn't think he was the sexiest man alive. And it's not just that. Like, I just didn't find him all that interesting. This movie did change that a bit for me. I found him arresting and interesting. They made way too big a deal over keeping his identity a secret. I think it maybe would have gone down a little more had they not made it like the biggest secret in the world when it was really obvious what it was going to be.
Yeah.
Can I say, like, I love the scene. One of my favorite scenes in the Star Trek franchise. I love the scene where Kirk tries to beat the crap out of Khan, and he can't. And there's no music for this scene, and it's very uncomfortable. The movie does not tell you how you should feel about this moment, and there's a lot of different ways to feel about it. I love that scene. It's provocative because of how weird it is that Kirk really can't overcome Khan physically. And I love that. I'm like, this is interesting. Like this, I felt like that feels in line with the Wrath of Khan. That's something that could have existed in that movie, and it could have been just as arresting then.
Like, my issues with this film have nothing to do with any of the performances. That's except for one very pivotal moment that is not earned, and it's just a shout out to be there. It's just there to be a shout out to its predecessor. It's one word, you know what it is. But the characters, like the actors, I think they did the best that they could with it. Like, I thought Simon Pegg was incredibly good as Scotty. Like, this was his chance to shine, was in this movie. Even though he has a chance in a different way in the third film. You've got Carl Urban kind of takes a little bit of a backseat, but he's still pretty darn entertaining. Like, there are no weak performances per se. Like, even Bruce Greenwood as Pike, that could have been played off really goofy and silly. I placed the blame for this movie entirely at the feet of Alex Kurtzman, Roberto Orci, and JJ. Like, it's a plot failure from start to finish.
It's a mess. There's that whole assassination, the terrorist act that happens in the first act. Mm-hmm. There's a subplot with Peter Weller's characters. There's a lot of stuff going on this movie doesn't need. The subplot.
RoboCop's an admiral.
It's cool to see him in the movie. Then you're going, oh, he deserved more than this. He should have been playing the Bruce Greenwood role. I mean, something a little more worthy of him. He's a good actor. But and let's not forget Alice Eve's subplot.
How can you not forget Alice Eve's subplot? She's there for one scene and one scene only. Like, it's the
which
entire
is becoming
point.
A legendary meme. Yeah, and I've seen her in other stuff. She had really quickly because you previously defended the hell out of Carl Urban. So let me defend Alice Eve for a second.
That's absolutely fair. Like, I'm not saying she's bad. I'm saying what she was put in a bad situation.
And and it's I find it unfortunate that this is the thing that she's remembered for basically that screenshot in Star Trek Into Darkness. She did a film with Harrison Ford no one saw called Crossing Over, a film about Border Patrol and immigrants. She's excellent in that film. She's Australian. She also did a film with Bryan Cranston, which I saw at the Denver Film Festival years ago. I can't remember the name of it. It's never been released. It never got released. It was one of these films that got buried, even though it was a Bryan Cranston.
Well, let me look her up because it's been she's pretty far down the list, but I've got her there.
I think it was called like The Dark of Night. I think it was called.
She was in Iron Fist.
She was.
Oh well, it's such a bad movie. Let's see here. She's in
Black Stinkers, no question.
Well, she was in a Black Mirror episode too.
Cool.
Like, I'm not saying that she's bad at all. She's in Men in Black 3, which is
Well,
well, no, I will defend 3. 2 is a dumpster fire, but 3,
2 is bad. Yeah, 2 is pretty bad. Yeah.
yeah.
Agreed.
I'm not seeing what it would have been. Huh. Okay. Oh well. I didn't know she was in Bombshell. What? Okay, she's
in
done a lot.
Bombshell?
Yeah, she played Ainsley Earhart. Huh. Okay. So to get to the core of my issue with Alice Eve, it has nothing to do with her. Like, nothing at all. Like, when she actually has chances to do something, like when she's trying to save the ship at the end of the movie, she was really compelling. The issue is that none of that matters for the scope of this movie. It is for a franchise that was based around being so progressive and trying to bring equality for women. For that to happen is a real low point in these films for me. It's something that needs to be called to account. And there, frankly, should be a reckoning about. I mean, no, it doesn't matter who it is. I mean, I'm not going to say Star Trek is perfect because we got Orion slave girls. Let's be honest. Like, it's a toss up between if Captain Kirk or Buck Rogers got with more women in space. Like, it's not a perfect thing, but it was just so blatant that I was just like, it made me feel dirty just watching it, even when I watched it today. Like, it was not good.
The scenes of Spock and Uhura bickering like an old couple, I don't like that either. That definitely felt written. It didn't feel like they would have this conversation. These are two really highly intellectual characters, to say the very least. It just didn't strike me that they would have this kind of cheap lovers tiff in the middle of a mission.
Well, at the end, when they're in the ship with Kirk and they kind of get over it, like that was a beautiful moment, I thought, between the two of them. But yeah, it's very. Yeah, I think you're right. It feels written. It doesn't feel organic at all.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think the performances are, for me, they're good enough that they salvage the film. I like the scenes where Khan is behind the glass and having like those Hannibal Lecter like conversations with Kirk. I like that very much. I was really disheartened, as you were, to see how closely they try to make this like the Wrath of Khan. That was really disappointing because it's such an obvious choice. And I feel like the first film, for all the things about it that made it definitely Star Trek, I thought it took some chances that were interesting. In this movie, I thought it, not necessarily that it played it safe, it just went in directions that were really obvious. And yeah, it's a movie I struggle now to even remember, and I just watched the thing.
You're being a lot kinder than I am.
I am. I don't think it's a disaster, but I agree with you. I think the plot's a mess. I don't know what happened there. Do you know? Like, did they run out of time? Was it just seriously rewritten?
If you read interviews,
like the tight movie that the first one is.
If you read the interviews before Roberto Orci goes completely off the deep end, like before the reaction from the fans came out, it was they were talking about how it's almost tougher to know where to go after the first film, and I'm like, you can go literally anywhere. Just don't do the thing that's already happened.
Right.
And to me, the film is guilty of this. There are two different things. I haven't told you this thing that it's guilty of to me. It's the same thing that Batman v Superman is guilty of with Zack Snyder, in that it has all these scenes that harken back to things in the lore that mean something to people, but don't earn a daggum thing in terms of an emotional investment. So they didn't do the earworm thing. Okay, great. Good for them. You want a cookie for that? When you go out of your way to have the big payoff be spoilers for a movie that's over 10 years old. Well, no, it's almost 10 years old. Who cares? It's a bad movie. When you decide to have the big twist be that Kirk dies instead of Spock, it's cheap.
Right.
And then it's even cheaper when you pull an X-Men The Last Stand, where this thing that actually you could at least try to do something interesting with turns out to be complete and utter BS that gets a triple saves the day. We'll just say it that way. Yeah. And it completely cheapened the film even more. Like, I was like, the beats aren't exactly the same. Like, this is not Wrath of Khan remade, because that would make for a better movie in my opinion. But the initial story bones are there. And it's just like, guys, you literally could go anywhere with this, and you went there.
Yeah.
That's unforgivable to me.
I think Kirk had a better death in Star Trek Generations. The first time he died in that movie, not the second time. The first time, which I think is a fantastic scene. If that movie had any balls, and it doesn't, he would have been out of that film after the opening scene. And I think that powerful cutaway of Chekhov and Scotty looking into the nothingness of the universe, knowing that that's where Kirk used to be, I think that would have been very powerful. And unfortunately, the movie
had it pulled an executive decision, essentially.
Right, which yeah, exactly. I think I know Generations is not a perfect film. I really like that film because of chunks of it, not all of it. But yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, the way they handle that, because that is, I mean, that scene in Star Trek 2, I mean, in The Wrath of Khan, it's so emotionally rich. It still is. It's like you wouldn't think that scene would work. They're behind a block of glass, but it is so beautiful and it's so moving. And the fact that they just try to crassly recreate that, no.
It's completely discounting the fact that these guys had, 3 years of a TV show. So you had, 60 some episodes to develop this relationship. Plus you had another movie before that to establish where they are now. Like, we're talking about a reboot in its second movie. Like, you gotta, even if you're gonna do it, you have to save that for when you've earned the right to do that story.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And by the way, just as a PS, that film I was trying to think of, Cold Comes the Night, starring Alice Eve and Bryan Cranston. It's a film noir. It's actually quite good. I really enjoyed it. I saw the Denver Film Festival. Cold Comes the Night. It's never been released anywhere. If you're a Bryan Cranston fan, he did this right around the time of Breaking Bad. Check it out. And she's excellent. Like, it's a great performance on her part. Okay. And certainly more so than what she provides for Star Trek.
And then we talk about the part at the end of the movie. We have to bring it up because it kind of segues nicely in that they decide they want to make a Fast and Furious movie with the chase scene on the garbage scows or whatever the heck those things were. It's just so bad. Like there's very, again, like I've come to peace with the fact that, like, watching it this time, it wasn't as bad as I remember it. And Steph said the same thing. We watched it together. But it's still not good. And I think it's purely weakness of writing and directing. And I don't like saying that about JJ because I like JJ for the most part. But we're all going to have ones where we're not going to hit it out of the park. And this is definitely one of those cases for me.
It's an off movie. I agree with you. For me, my thumb is up to like what Gene Siskel used to say. My thumb is up to the favorable sense of it, but it's not great. I'll defend this movie, but only to a point.
Now, here's the fun part is I think we're going to end up doing a flip-flop when it comes to talking about Star Trek Beyond.
I think so.
Because I'll be really, so it kind of leads Into Darkness leads into Beyond in real life, not so much in the story so much. So Into Darkness comes out. To say it's panned by Trek nerds is a very kind thing. And Roberto Orci comes out and essentially says, if you don't like it, y'all can go F yourselves. I'm right, you're wrong, you all are idiots. Not only that, I'm going to direct the next Star Trek movie. To which the internet essentially said, great, we're not going to watch the next Star Trek movie. To which Paramount said, oh crap, we need to get rid of Roberto Orci. I hope that he has softened his stance since then. This movie was a massive, Into Darkness was a massive misstep to me. It made me, his reaction thereafter made me really not interested in watching anything he's done ever since. I don't even know what he's done since. I should look that up.
He's a Transformers guy, right?
That's right. He did Transformers movies.
Everything Transformers, yeah.
Okay. Oh, and he worked on Scorpion. Oh, good Lord. Yeah, I think I'm good. I think.
Wait. Finish that sentence, Dave. Did he work on the Scorpion King?
No, he worked on the TV show Scorpion, which is like a crappy hacker show.
Oh, that's.
No, he's an executive producer. What did he actually do anything on? Hang on here. Let's see. He wrote on that. He wrote on Sleepy Hollow, Matador. No idea what that is. He's got a created by credit on Fringe. That's the one thing that he did that I was like, ooh, Fringe was a pretty fun show. Fringe was a fun show, and he wrote the screenplay for Legend of Zorro, so he hasn't done all bad stuff. But just after that, I was just like, I got to tap out, dude. Sorry. So they ended up bringing in Simon Pegg to write a script for Beyond.
That's right.
Which I think is pretty gutsy because Pegg has said from the beginning he's not the biggest Star Trek fan. He's more of a Star Wars fan. Sure. You can absolutely make the argument that Beyond shows that. I also think that he dug into the original TV series and wrote a movie that feels very much at home in the canon of the original Star Trek TV show. Let's go ahead and roll the trailer. I found the version that didn't have pop music because I'm trying to avoid copyright strikes if we can help it, and that was really hard with this movie. There's Beastie Boys. There's a couple of different songs that have been used. So let's roll the one that doesn't have us getting hosed, and we'll be right back.
It isn't uncommon, you know. It's easy to get lost in the vastness of space. There's only yourself, your ship, your crew.
You really want to head back out there, huh?
So the thing with Star Trek Beyond for me is that it's not doing something grandiose. And it's good and it's bad that you're doing that, because you're only you're the third film into a franchise. You should be able to do a lot more bigger picture kind of world building if you want to. And this film really isn't that interested in doing so. However, one thing that really struck with me is that it really builds out the relationship between the big three, kind of like we did with Star Trek 5 and 6, between Spock, Bones, and McCoy. Spock, Kirk, and McCoy. That's what I meant to say. And the fact that it starts off on such a melancholy note, at first I was like, I don't think this really has earned the right to do that. But as the movie went on, it won me over pretty handily. Like it's easily my second favorite of the films, if not my first. What after Into Darkness, what were you thinking when Beyond started coming out and about, especially when they announced they're going to have Justin Lim from the Fast and Furious franchise? First we're going to fake doing a Fast and Furious movie, now we're actually going to make one.
Yeah, that definitely didn't sell me at all. And I got to say, I was pleasantly surprised what a good job that he did. There's a visual continuity between the films. But yeah, I wasn't dying for another Star Trek movie, because I didn't hate Into Darkness, but I was very indifferent to it. I have to go out of my way to even watch Into Darkness repeatedly. The first movie, I think I watch every couple of years. I love it so much. But Into Darkness, I just didn't really care enough about to even acknowledge that it exists. So when they announced that Star Trek Beyond was happening, all I thought was, well, I hope it works. But I can't say that I was dying for another one, because I just feel like the first movie, I feel like the first movie made its point. Because even though these adventures are rich and these characters have so many opportunities, it really is about who they were before these legendary missions that they did when they were middle-aged and older. So I wasn't convinced that the franchise justified to keep going. I was pleasantly surprised that, as you've indicated, this isn't messily constructed like Into Darkness. The plot is very clear-cut, certainly, and I know you're one of the world's biggest Simon Pegg fans. I think you were the first person to ever introduce me to Simon Pegg, by the way, well before he was well known. I think the fact that he's writing it had something to do with that. It is often a very funny film, which is nice. What I liked about the film. I like that the plot was very clear cut. It's a location film. It cuts to one location, yes. and we're it's all about them building back to each other. I thought it did that really well. The geography of it's really well established, as you've indicated. The relationships are first and foremost here. It's not it's not this big labyrinthine plot like the prior film was. The cast is still enjoyable to watch together. The action scenes are really well done. I like that we finally got to see the character of Crawl played by Idris Elba without all the makeup.
Yes.
And I say this with all due respect. I love it when actors feel the need to disappear. For me, this was not unlike when Oscar Isaac played Apocalypse in X-Men Apocalypse, where it's like, why even cast a name actor when you can't see his freaking face? Mm-hmm. It drives me nuts. And look, like there are, and you know this as well as I do, Dave, there are some actors who are so amazing, they transcend the makeup. Idris Elba, I just thought he looks like he's freaking embalmed by this makeup.
Yes.
So and I think and don't get me wrong, like he does fine. He does a fine job, but at the same time, I mean, I think he's one of our best. I love Idris Elba. So when the film, and I think the second or the third act, when he loses the makeup, I was really relieved, because now I could really get engaged with this character. It's not an actor in lizard makeup.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. Like he wasn't asked to do a lot, but when I think it was a smart move to ask him to carry more of the film once he looks more like himself. That might be the best way to put that. It's I don't know. I don't know what the runtime is on this movie. I should look it up. I have it sitting here. It is just over 2 hours long, and it feels pretty tight even for a 2 hour long movie.
It is. I agree with you. It certainly, compared to the prior film, it feels very tight. I'll tell you my two biggest problems.
Yes, please do. Yeah, let's just get. I dumped all over Into Darkness. It's your turn. It's okay.
It's only fair. Yeah, no, I don't hate this film. I mean, for me, it's a 3-star film. I like the film. I enjoyed it. I just don't think about it. My two big problems with it. I feel like it's guilty of doing what the new Star Wars films, and certainly what Star Trek Into Darkness did. It's a recycle movie, just like Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. This is a film in which the Enterprise crashes, and then our main characters are on foot in the wilderness for most of the film, and the main bad guy is covered in makeup. I just felt like this feels just like The Search for Spock, except they're not looking for Spock. And my other problem with it, this is a minor quibble, but I think, again, to really nerd out for a second, Gene Roddenberry, what he did with this series is so profound. He was able to talk about social issues. I know I'm just preaching to the choir here, but he was able to talk about things that no one else was talking about in regular genre. He was able to hide in the Trojan horse of science fiction and talk about what was going on in the world, stuff that's still relevant. And to see a movie, to spoil it, but I think you all know what I'm about to say, to see a movie that wants to tell us that Sulu has been gay the whole time in the most tossed off, timid, and I thought really forced way, just as bad as that quote unquote gay moment in Beauty and the Beast. I thought that was just such a way to undersell that. No, I mean, if he is a gay man, this is Gene Roddenberry. This guy was always progressive. Have that out in the open. Don't make it be something that the movie feels ashamed to reveal. I was so disappointed by that. And I know on one hand it's a small thing, but I thought it was really a short-sighted thing in the movie to make it a small thing.
I was okay with it. Like, it's way better than what they did in Rise of Skywalker.
Oh yeah, well,
I mean, the bar can be set. I
right,
don't want to throw.
They couldn't wait to get past that moment. Yeah,
I don't want to throw JJ under the bus twice in one episode. I really don't, because I like the guy a lot.
Well, he didn't do this one, right? I mean, in this, what's his involvement with?
No, but he did Rise of Skywalker.
Rise of Skywalker. That's right. Oh, I forgot. Yeah,
I know. Okay, those are pretty fair criticisms. I can roll with that. For me, a lot of it was like they were just able to get back to what an old school fun Star Trek episode could be.
Yeah.
And I like the villain once again is kind of the weak point of the film.
Yeah.
The highlight is by far, and it's not even close, when you've got McCoy and Spock running around together. Like that was almost Star Trek 4 levels of fun to me. Like it was I loved every single second of those two together.
And there's a motorcycle chase. Like we actually get Kirk back on a motorcycle, which is pretty amazing. And of course, to state the obvious, the use of the Beastie Boys once again in this world is pretty. I love the Beastie Boys exist in the Star Trek universe. That makes me very happy.
I like it more that Public Enemy exists in the Star Trek universe. I was
That's
like,
right.
Scotty walks in and I'm like, they're playing friggin' Public Enemy? This makes me so very happy because this, once again, not Dad's Star Trek, just saying.
Yes.
I just had an outright good time with it from start to end. I mean, plot wise, if there's a weakness in it, it's that it really doesn't get to. It kind of tries to go where Star Trek 6 went, where it's like, Kirk's tired, Spock's tired, he may have other responsibilities, and then you have the villain kind of reflect that same kind of melancholy and that uncertainty about what's coming down the road. And it just didn't quite land the same way this time around because they didn't get to like halfway through the third act before they talk about, how people can be left behind, as old relics and just kind of tossed to the side and put into a position that they're not going to succeed in. And that was a disappointment for me. It absolutely is. When it came out, it was I was glad. I mean, it was a very good idea. I just kind of wish it had been more ingrained into the plot line.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair.
But everything, I mean, the gags about the Vulcan tracking device, that's just like, they finally hit their groove with this third film. And I mean, you really can't talk about the film without talking about the passing of Anton Yelchin. Cause that happened right about the same time. And I remember I was working DCC and Carl Urban was a guest. And I think it was that Sunday morning, the news broke about what had happened. And like it was everyone completely understood when I think he and Katie Sackhoff were both there and they were together at the time, and they just kind of left, and every single person there really understood it, and like it was obviously not a good, it brought a downer to what had been a very fun weekend, but at the same time it was kind of comforting to kind of have a bunch of people like, we all understand why we're all down and kind of in mourning and sad today. Like when an actor passes, some people are going to care, some people aren't. Like it's not saying that you're not going to say that it's sad that someone passed away at such a young age, but there's something about being in your tribe of people who all understand all too well exactly what you're going through. And so like I know they talked about making a Star Trek 4 that completely bombed, has stalled out for whatever reason. And I'm like, if you can't bring him back, I'm kind of okay with not doing another movie. Yeah. So like that was kind of that was kind of a downer when that, in that time frame. So that might be a reason why I think so highly about it too, because it's like, it's one of Anton Yelchin's last roles.
Yeah.
And
I agree with you. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, no, he was a remarkable talent who passed entirely too early. Like he was the upside of that Terminator movie, because he was doing a Michael Biehn like scary well. Like he was the one good thing of that movie. Green Room is staggeringly good. And it's just like he was taken so young. So like that's kind of put a shadow on the franchise, I think. And understandably so.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think they should keep going. I would rather they walk away at this point and just figure something else, rather than there being an obvious gap in that chemistry, because it's an ensemble cast, but it's a great ensemble cast. For me, that's the best special effect in these movies, that cast. The casting in this film, especially even to go back to the first one, I can't imagine it working without everyone being so well suited for every single role. And he was a real vital part of that, and he brought such heart and such inventiveness to that character. Yeah, so I'm with you. I think it would be very unwise to go back without him.
Yeah, yes. So that's kind of a downer to end the discussion about these films on, but I think it's important to bring up because, man, he's missed. Like I'm just like, I think about the career he could have had, and it's just like, oh, it's just so sad.
Yeah, he was really incredible. I mean, I remember him as a young actor. He did a Stephen King film called Hearts in Atlantis with Sir Anthony Hopkins. That was the first time I ever saw him in anything, and I was really taken by his work. But then, not long before he died, he did a film about a long distance relationship called Like Crazy. It was with him and Felicity Jones, and Jennifer Lawrence is in the film too. No. I love that film. It's a heartbreaker of film, but it's a romantic drama, and it's beautiful, and he's so good in it. And it's funny. I'm with you. I think about his performance in Terminator Salvation, because as much as that film underwhelmed in some ways, I like that movie a lot more than most. But I agree, it's not a classic. But man, his scenes in that movie popped. Like I still remember his take on Kyle Reese. I would have loved to have seen the young Kyle Reese movie with him in that role.
Absolutely, I can see that for sure. Yeah,
I miss Anton Yelchin. I think we all do.
Yeah, and so after the films came out, and with his tragic passing, no one knew really what to do, what was going to happen, and then came the idea of doing that Star Trek Academy show again, and that's just kind of the idea that's just been floating around forever. I don't think it'll ever die. But then they ended up doing, CBS decided, hey, we own the rights to the TV version of the universe. We're going to continue it. And then they jumped into doing Star Trek Discovery. Did you get a chance to watch any of the episodes, like even the freebie, first one? Okay. No. It is something entirely new and different, to be sure. Yeah. Follows it rewrites some canon. Like if you can't get past it, I understand. I think it's worth trying to get past, in that it centers on Michael Burnham, who is a human who's raised by Spock's family. So he's essentially Spock's adopted sister, which brings up some difficulties, and just trying to retcon things just never fits perfectly. And the show is definitely not without its flaws. The first season, about half the season, centers around what the Klingons are doing at that time. And it is just a complete train wreck of a story. Like every time it happens, like Steph and I almost tapped out several times. We're just like, this is the dumbest thing on the face of the earth. But when it centered around what was going on with the Federation, it got really interesting really quickly, because you ended up having Captain Pike come in at some point. You end up in the second season, you have Spock come into the picture in a very interesting way. That allows for this to, chronologically, I haven't even talked about that. This takes place before Star Trek: The Original Series and after Enterprise, so it's kind of playing in that gray area, but there's at least the attempt to play with it. And the cast on that show again is very solid. Like Doug Jones as Saru it's probably some of his most nuanced work. And he's in makeup the whole daggum time, but he's really good in it. And I'm looking up. I love having the internet and having a decent internet connection. Let me see, who is the other. There are a lot of characters who are to be liked a lot. Where is she? Mary Wiseman, who plays Sylvia Tilly. Tilly is just like this firecracker of happiness and optimism, who, despite how hard people may be trying to crush it down, she won't let up, and it's absolutely a joy to see. Anthony Rapp as Stamets is the head engineer, who's a complete D-bag, but becomes incredibly compelling, and you just can't kind of love the guy by the end of the first season. And so there's a lot of character work put into this. Michelle Yeoh figures into it in a very interesting way. They actually find a way to do the mirror universe and make it actually mean something. And it's an interesting ride. I think the second season builds on the first season. The first season is very dark, very dour. And then the second season's like, hey, we need to have some fun. And that's when they bring Spock and Pike in. Rebecca Romaine plays number one, like plays the first officer for Pike.
Awesome.
And it is a heck of a good time. It's worth at least, even if you can do the free month of CBS All Access at some point, it's well worth the time to check out. Not just that, but they did a bunch of short films essentially based around that same universe. And you got stuff like Aldous Hodge from Invisible Man and Leverage and Underground and whatever else, plays a guy who's trapped on a spaceship. And I'm not going to ruin anything about it, but it's incredibly heartbreaking and endearing. Just how beautiful that story is. H. John Benjamin, also known as Sterling Archer or Bob Belcher, plays the guy who discovers tribbles and is a complete and utter D-bag in the most delicious way humanly possible. And these little short films that you would never care about at all, they would just be extras on any other set. I think they either just have been released or are going to be released on Blu-ray separately from the show itself, because they're just so darn good. I think if you're a Trek nerd, it's worth checking out what Discovery has to offer. And we got Picard back. Jean-Luc Picard's back. Patrick Stewart's doing his thing. And it'd be really easy for that to just be a double dip that just is a waste of everyone's time, which I think is why Stewart has said, I don't want to do this anymore. Actually, in interviews, he said that Logan was what made him open to doing Picard again, because it was such a departure of who Xavier is, that it's like, well, if we can do something interesting like that, then I'm in. And until it doesn't do it, until it's awful at the very end, it's a really good show. It has fan service executed well. You have older characters come back. You see Jerry Ryan, we mentioned her earlier, playing Seven of Nine. You have the guy who played Hugh the Borg come into play, and it's not just like a little guest spot of, hey, there he is, goodbye. He plays an integral part to the season. Hang on just one sec. Been talking for a while. But it's very much about Picard as he's getting older and understanding the limits of mortality and still trying to do the right thing. If I have criticisms, it's that the last episode pulls an X-Men 3. That's all I'm going to say. It gets telegraphed just as bad as an Into Darkness. And there are parts where Picard is being that bombastic leader who's just doing what he needs to do to get things going. And there's a scene in an episode where he pushes one of his crew members to do something and push a relationship that actually destroys the relationship. And she's absolutely crushed when it happens. But after the conversation's over, he's just applauding. You did great. You did great. And I was waiting for that to pay off of, dude, you aren't paying attention to the cost of the people who are being around you. That never quite paid off. But even with those criticisms, it's still a heck of a fun ride for that season. So, shockingly enough, CBS All Access, it's worth checking out for a month just to mainline that stuff, if nothing else.
Awesome. Okay.
So, yeah. I think we're pretty well good talking Star Trek. That's been fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Get to get our nerd on. Earn that geek name in ScreenGeeks.
I think we've earned it today.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And we're going to have more fun coming up. I mean, we're going to obviously dig into more serious movies again at some point, but there's been a lot of fun stuff that's come out that I think that we both think is worth talking about. They'll be coming up. We'll talk about what's coming up next week here in a little bit. But if you want to catch us on the internet, where can we find you, Barry, these days?
My reviews, let's see, on Hollywood in Toto, the hit site, hollywoodintoto.com. Rotten Tomatoes is doing some interesting maintenance lately, so I don't think you can see my stuff there. But yeah, Hollywood in Toto, and then of course my reviews have been up on mauitime.com for a while. And of course you can just go to hawaiifilmcriticsociety.com. That's hifilmcriticsociety.org.
Yes, and are you still doing Maui Watch?
Maui Watch, well, that was all theater. So
okay.
Right now there's no theater. so technically,
or Nerd Watch.
Yes.
I'm thinking Nerd Watch.
Every once in a while, I try to chime in. Yeah, that was a podcast my buddy Greg Turner and I created in 2014. Yeah, it's still going strong. You know, they've got a lot of guys on that show. So at this point, I'm like the dork who they bring in for special movie episodes, which is great. But really, they don't even need me. That show is doing fantastic. But yeah, I still pop in with the Nerd Watch. You go to Nerd Watch. That's on iTunes actually.
Okay, cool. Right on.
Yeah,
and,
it's
cool. I want to do one Star Trek shout out. Like, I don't think I've brought it up at all, but as I can, I try to keep the comic book cover behind me something relevant to what we're talking about. So if you go back and look at the No Holds Barred, it's a Creeper issue that looks like he's a wrestler. That's like the closest I had. This storyline crossing over Star Trek with the Green Lantern Corps is shockingly good. Haven't read the second volume or whatever the sequel they did, but the original story feels like an old school Star Trek episode if they brought the Green Lantern Corps and the various different Lantern Corps in, and it works surprisingly well. I highly recommend reading it if you catch it on sale on Amazon or something. If you want to catch old episodes of our podcast, by all means, go to ScreenGeeks.com. If you want to catch old video episodes, you can go to Facebook.com/ScreenGeeks or ScreenGeeks.YouTube.com. If you want to leave us a voicemail, you can at 970-315-2048. Or if you want to shoot us an email, by all means do. Podcast, Barry, or Dave, all at ScreenGeeks.com. Next week, we're in July, so I thought we'd do a little Christmas in July episode for fun. And I'm giving you homework. You said you wanted homework, so I'm giving you homework. We're going to be taking a look at the fantastic film And in the Apocalypse. We're looking at hopefully getting a guest in for that. And we'll have some fun after that, too. But until next time, this is Dave.
This is Barry.
Take it easy. We'll see you next week.